The stench hit me first, a visceral wave of putridity that assaulted the senses, completely overpowering the clean, sweet scent of freshly cut grass and the delicate perfume of the jasmine blooming along Mrs. Henderson's fence. It was the unmistakable foul odor of dog feces, and it had been smeared with a deliberate, hateful malevolence across the bright yellow seat of my daughter Lena's bicycle. Her best friend, Mateo's smaller blue bike parked innocently beside hers, bore the same disgusting desecration. And there, scrawled in large, almost childishly rendered chalk letters on the pristine pavement beneath the bikes, was the brutal three-word declaration, "Not your park." Lena and Mateo, both 8 years old and shimmering with the pure, uncomplicated energy of a sunny afternoon, stood frozen. Their faces, moments before, alight with the joy of imminent adventure, were now crumpled in a mask of confusion and profound disgust. They had been buzzing with excitement, their new bikes gleaming under the California sun, a symbol of their growing independence. The park across the street, a small emerald jewel of green space that served as the heart of our close-knit neighborhood, was their destination. Now that simple joy had been violently ripped away, replaced by a bewildering targeted violation that their young minds could not yet process. A fury unlike any I had ever known rose within me. It was not a hot, explosive anger, but a cold, dense mass that settled deep in my gut, a slow burn that threatened to consume the very air I breathed. This was not a random prank executed by bored teenagers. This was not some thoughtless act of vandalism. This was precise. This was personal. This was an unmistakable message delivered in the most degrading way imaginable. My gaze, sharp and instinctive, swept across the street, and I saw her. Standing on her impeccably manicured lawn, a monument to suburban order, she was tending to her prize-winning rose bushes, a watering can held delicately in one hand. Eleanor Albright. To most, she was a fastidious retiree, a pillar of the community. To those who had felt the sting of her disapproval, she was simply Karen, the self-appointed guardian of our neighborhood's unwritten and often suffocating code of conduct. She was a woman whose quiet disdain for anything or anyone that didn't fit her narrow, monochromatic worldview was as predictable as the setting sun. She did not look at us directly, but I saw it all. The subtle, triumphant stiffness in her posture, the barely perceptible smirk that played on her lips as she pretended to inspect a petal. She was watching. She was observing her handiwork, savoring the distress it caused, drawing a perverse satisfaction from the poisoned atmosphere she had created. Lena Mateo. "Come here," I said, my voice a carefully controlled island of calm in the storm raging inside me. I knelt on the pavement, ignoring the filth, trying to meet their bewildered, questioning eyes. "It's okay. We'll clean this up. It's just someone being very, very unkind." But my mind screamed the truth. It wasn't just unkindness. It was a calculated act of degradation, a hateful message scrawled in chalk, and filth aimed directly at two innocent children because of the beautiful brown skin they lived in. It was an act of territorial aggression designed to make them feel unwelcome, alien and dirty, in the one place they should have felt most safe. And Eleanor Albright, with her carefully cultivated image of civic responsibility and neighborhood pride, was the author of this poison pen letter. My hand was already moving, pulling my phone from my pocket. My fingers, steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me, were already dialing. As the phone rang, I focused my gaze on Eleanor, a laser beam of accusation across the 20 yards of pristine asphalt that separated us. I needed her to see me. I needed her to understand that her petty, cowardly act of malice had not gone unnoticed. She finally glanced up from her roses, her performance of detached gardening faltering for a split second. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something. Was it surprise? Or was it fear crossing her placid features before the mask of indifference snapped back into place? "Yes, hello," I said into the phone, my voice firm, professional, and carrying clearly in the quiet afternoon air. "This is David Ramsey. I'm the Deputy Director of the State Office of Community Justice. I need to report a hate incident in progress at the corner of Willow Creek Drive and Glenview Avenue." I kept my eyes locked on Eleanor. As I spoke, my brain automatically documenting every detail, every nuance of her reaction for the report I knew I would be filing. She turned her back to me, with a sudden jerky movement, pretending to be utterly absorbed in her task, but I saw the tremor in her hands as she gripped the watering can. Oh, she knew. She may not have known my exact title, but she knew I was not someone to be trifled with. She knew she had been seen. Her disgusting little act of racist vandalism, meant to intimidate a child, was about to bring her face to face with a system she could not bully a man whose entire life's work was to dismantle the very brand of hatred she so casually peddled. The game had just begun, and she had no idea of the rules or of who she was playing against. Our life in the Willow Creek Estates was a conscious choice, a carefully constructed sanctuary we had built amidst the complexities and demands of my professional world. As the Deputy Director of the state's Office of Community Justice, my days were a tightrope walk across the fault lines of society. I spent my time mediating bitter disputes, facilitating restorative justice circles, and developing programs aimed at addressing systemic inequities. My work was predicated on a deep, almost stubborn belief in the power of dialogue, in the fundamental capacity of people to overcome their deepest prejudices and find common ground. It was a profession that demanded infinite patience, a high tolerance for frustration, and an unwavering commitment to the messy, imperfect process of building a more just world. My wife Sarah was my partner in this belief system. As a beloved middle school history teacher, her classroom was a living laboratory for the kind of society we hoped to build. She had a rare gift for connecting with adolescents, for nurturing their innate sense of fairness, and challenging them to see the world from perspectives other than their own. Our two children, Lena and her older brother Marcus, who at 15 was named for my father, a lifelong civil rights activist, were the center of our universe. They were bright, inquisitive, and thanks to Sarah's influence, deeply compassionate. We had chosen Willow Creek, a sprawling subdivision known for its excellent schools, its leafy tree-lined streets, and its glossy brochure promising a welcoming, family-oriented atmosphere as the place to raise them. Eleanor Albright was the crack in this idyllic facade. She was an anomaly in our otherwise harmonious, diverse cul-de-sac. A retired accountant in her late 60s, widowed for over a decade, she lived alone in a large, sterile house that was as meticulously maintained as it was devoid of warmth. Her interactions with the world were transactional, and she seemed to carry a ledger in her mind, tallying up the minor infractions and perceived slights of her neighbors. Her yard was her kingdom, a perfect, unnaturally green expanse that she defended with a ferocity bordering on the pathological. Her dog, a small neurotically yappy terrier named Precious, was less a companion and more an accessory, a living prop in the performance of her life as a respectable homeowner. From the day we moved in, there had been a palpable chill in her demeanor towards us. It was never overt, never anything you could pin down, but it was there, a constant low-grade hum of disapproval. The microaggressions were her specialty. A lingering critical stare when Lena wore her hair in intricate braids, a style Eleanor likely deemed too urban for our quiet street. A pointed comment about keeping our property tidy, delivered loudly to another neighbor after we hosted a lively backyard barbecue for Marcus's soccer team. A habit of calling animal control if our cat, a docile creature named Jasper, dared to sun himself on our own front porch. Each instance was a small cut, a subtle reminder that in her eyes, we were on probation, our presence a deviation from the established norm. The brazen act of smearing feces on our children's bikes, however, was a shocking and sickening escalation. It was a violent tearing away of the thin veneer of neighborly civility. It stripped away all pretense, laying her prejudice bare for the world to see. The hateful chalked message was not a dog whistle. It was a blaring siren. The inciting incident was not just an attack on property. It was a targeted act of hate, an attempt to soil the innocence of childhood, and to stake a claim of ownership over a shared public space. It was a vile intrusion into the sanctuary of our neighborhood, a brutal reminder that the very same poisons I fought on a systemic institutional level every day could manifest in the most personal and disgusting ways right on my own doorstep. Eleanor had drawn a line on the pavement, and I knew with every fiber of my being that I could not let her action stand. This was my community, this was my park, and these were my children, and I would fight for them with the full weight of the law and the unwavering conviction of a father's love. The responding officers, a man and a woman whose faces showed a weary professionalism, were thankfully thorough. They didn't dismiss it as a simple prank. They saw the words scrawled on the pavement. They saw the two silent, shaken children, and they understood. They documented the scene meticulously, taking photographs from every angle, carefully collecting a sample of the chalk dust as evidence. They spoke with Lena and Mateo with a gentle kindness that began to chip away at the children's fear, reassuring them that the police were there to help. While they couldn't immediately march across the street and arrest Eleanor, based on my suspicion alone, my official statement combined with the undeniable racial animus of the chalked message was enough for them to open a formal investigation. The words, "hate incident," were spoken into their radios, and with that, a line was crossed. The machinery of the justice system, a system I knew intimately, began to grind into motion. The rising action, however, began almost immediately, fueled by Eleanor's predictable, lily-white defensiveness, and the insidious way that prejudice can fester and spread within a community that prefers comfort over confrontation. The first counterattack came the next morning, a subtle but unmistakable escalation. A crisp, professionally printed letter appeared in our mailbox. It was anonymous, of course, typed on expensive cream-colored stationery that spoke of a certain kind of wealth and entitlement. The letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive gaslighting. It accused us of being overly sensitive and eager to find offense where none is intended. It dismissed the vile act as a childish prank that went too far and warned us in no uncertain terms against making baseless and inflammatory accusations against a long-standing, respected member of our community. The subtext was as clear as the chalk on the pavement. We were the outsiders. We were the ones disrupting the peace with our accusations. We should be grateful to live in a neighborhood like Willow Creek, and we should know our place and let this go quietly. Then came the inevitable online campaign. Eleanor, or her network of allies, began posting veiled comments on the neighborhood's private social media page. The posts were clever, never mentioning us by name, but the target was clear. They spoke vaguely about the importance of respecting property lines and the need to keep our public spaces clean and orderly for everyone. They lamented a perceived decline in neighborly consideration. The comments subtly shifted the narrative, planting seeds of doubt and painting Lena and Mateo, two 8-year-olds, as somehow responsible for the desecration of their own property. A few neighbors, people who had always been part of Eleanor's inner circle, chimed in with supportive replies echoing her sentiments and creating a digital climate of suspicion and hostility. "Some people just don't know how to look after their things," one wrote. "The park is for everyone, but that means everyone has to be responsible," wrote another. The second shocking incident, the one that felt like a punch to the gut, occurred a few days later. It was a direct consequence of the poison being spread online. Lena came home from school in tears, her small shoulders shaking with a hurt that was far deeper than the initial incident. Some of the children in her class, children she considered her friends, had started whispering and pointing at her on the playground. They had parroted the words they had likely overheard from their parents. They called her dirty. One boy told her she should go back where she came from. The casual, unthinking cruelty of children repeating the prejudices of their parents was a brutal reminder of how quickly the venom of hate can spread, infecting the most innocent of minds. That was the moment I knew this fight could not be contained. This wasn't just about one woman's hateful act anymore. It was about a deeper, more pervasive current of prejudice that flowed just beneath the placid surface of our perfect community. Eleanor had not created this current, but she had tapped into it, amplified it, and given it a voice. I decided then and there that I could not fight this battle privately. It needed to be brought into the light. I contacted a journalist I knew at a local news station, a woman with a reputation for thoughtful, in-depth reporting on social justice issues. I shared the details of the incident, the anonymous letter, the online harassment, and the bullying at school. I spoke not as an angry father, but as a community justice expert, framing the story, not as a personal grievance, but as a case study in how hate incidents can escalate and impact an entire community. The story aired that evening on the 10 o'clock news. It was powerful and nuanced, focusing on the impact of hate on children and the responsibility of a community to stand up against it. While Eleanor was not named directly, the details of the incident and the location were unmistakable to anyone living in Willow Creek Estates. The camera panned over a blurred image of the chalk message, a stark and damning visual. The response was immediate and deeply divisive. Our phone rang off the hook. Many residents called to express their outrage and their unwavering support for our family. They were ashamed and horrified that this had happened in their neighborhood. They organized a small, impromptu gathering in the park the next evening, a Stand for Solidarity event, where neighbors wrote messages of love and welcome in colorful chalk on the very pavement that had been defiled. Others, however, doubled down in their defense of Eleanor. They accused me of using the media to bully an elderly woman. They claimed the whole thing was being blown out of proportion for political reasons. The community was fracturing along pre-existing fault lines, the polite fiction of neighborhood harmony shattered. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not just determine the outcome of our personal struggle, but would define the very character of our community for years to come. The midpoint twist in this suburban drama arrived not through a dramatic confession or a smoking gun delivered by an informant, but through the quiet, methodical work of data analysis, a skill I had honed over years in my profession. The police investigation was moving slowly, hampered by the lack of direct eyewitnesses. Eleanor, when questioned, had been the picture of offended dignity, denying everything, and providing a vague alibi that was difficult to disprove. I knew that to truly hold her accountable, I needed more than suspicion. I needed irrefutable proof. I started with the security footage. The park itself didn't have cameras, a fact Eleanor was surely aware of. However, a small accounting firm on the corner opposite the park had a high-resolution security camera aimed at their front entrance. I had already reviewed this footage and shared it with the police. It showed Eleanor and Precious near the scene, but it wasn't definitive. The angle was poor, and the resolution wasn't sharp enough to see exactly what she was doing. But I was the Deputy Director of Community Justice. My office had access to resources that a local police precinct did not, including advanced digital forensic software. I took a copy of the raw video file to our tech lab and asked our analyst, a brilliant young woman named Jen, to work her magic. "See what you can enhance, Jen," I told her. "Focus on the bag." While Jen worked, I pursued another angle. I filed a public records request for all of Eleanor Albright's past complaints to the City Council, the Parks Department, and Animal Control over the last 5 years. I wanted to establish a pattern of behavior to document her long-standing obsession with control and her animosity towards anyone she perceived as an outsider. The files were a revelation. They painted a picture of a woman engaged in a years-long low-grade war against her own community. There were dozens of complaints, noise complaints against the Hispanic family who lived behind her, parking complaints against the young gay couple who rented the house on the corner, and, most tellingly, a series of increasingly agitated complaints about the public park. This was the real twist. It wasn't just about a general sense of prejudice. It was about the park. For 3 years, Eleanor had been leading a private, relentless campaign to have the park, which was public city property, privatized and absorbed into the HOA. Her letters to the city council were filled with paranoid rhetoric about transient individuals and unsupervised youths from outside our immediate area using the park. She argued that privatization was a matter of safety and maintaining property values. The city council had, of course, rejected her proposal every time, citing the public's right to access green spaces. The attack on my children's bikes was not a random outburst. It was a strategic move in her long-running war. Our family, a black family actively using and enjoying the public park, represented everything she was fighting against. We were the living embodiment of the outsiders she so desperately wanted to exclude. The disgusting act was a tactic, a piece of psychological warfare designed to make the park feel unsafe and unwelcoming to families like mine, perhaps in the hope that, if enough undesirable people stopped using it, her case for privatization would be strengthened. Jen called me a few days later. "Got something for you, David," she said, her voice crackling with excitement. I went down to her lab, a darkened room filled with glowing monitors. She pulled up the enhanced footage. The image was still grainy, but she had managed to sharpen a few crucial frames. In one, as Eleanor walked away from the scene, her hand shifted for a split second, revealing the bag clipped to Precious's leash. It was not the generic black bag she normally used. It was a bright, almost fluorescent green, with a distinctive white paw print logo. "That's the brand they give out for free at the Bark Park, over on Route 17. Jen said, pulling up an image from the park's website. It was a perfect match. I stared at the screen, a cold sense of triumph washing over me. In her depositions with the police, Eleanor had sworn under oath that she never went to the Bark Park, that it was filthy and full of poorly behaved animals. She had established her own alibi, and now this small, bright green bag had completely destroyed it. It was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. We had her at the scene. We had the means, the bag for carrying the feces. We had the long-established motive, her obsessive, racially tinged campaign to privatize the park. And now, we had proof that she had lied to the police. This wasn't just a hate incident anymore. This was a felony case of perjury and filing a false police report on top of everything else. The game had not just changed. It was over. All that was left was the checkmate. The emergency town hall meeting, called by the HOA president, the well-meaning but perpetually overwhelmed Mr. Henderson, was meant to be a forum for healing. Instead, it became a courtroom. The community center was packed, a standing room-only crowd of anxious and angry neighbors. The air was thick with a toxic cocktail of resentment, fear, and morbid curiosity. Eleanor sat in the front row, a martyr in a cashmere sweater, flanked by her two most loyal supporters. She had positioned herself as the victim, a pillar of the community being railroaded by an aggressive newcomer and a politically correct media. She was prepared for a fight, but she had no idea she was about to face a public indictment. I sat with Sarah on the other side of the room. We were not alone. The story in the news had galvanized our allies. The family of Mateo was there, as were several other families of color from the neighborhood and its surrounding areas who had seen the report and felt a painful kinship with our experience. A contingent of teachers from Sarah's school had come to support her. We were a quiet, diverse coalition, a visual representation of the community Eleanor so desperately wanted to erase. Mr. Henderson opened the meeting with a weak, rambling plea for calm and civility. He wrung his hands, speaking of the need for neighborly dialogue. Then he made the mistake of opening the floor for comments. Eleanor's hand shot up first. She walked to the microphone with a practiced slowness, her face a mask of wounded dignity. Her speech was a masterwork of manipulation. She spoke of her long-standing commitment to Willow Creek, of the years she had dedicated to maintaining our shared standards. She never mentioned us by name, but she spoke of newcomers who don't understand our ways and who are quick to cry wolf. She painted herself as the victim of a vicious and unfounded media smear campaign. All I have ever wanted, she concluded, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, is a safe, clean, and peaceful neighborhood for all of us. And I am heartbroken that my good intentions have been so horribly misconstrued. Her supporters applauded loudly. A few other residents, swayed by her performance, nodded in agreement. For a moment, the momentum in the room shifted in her favor. When she finished, I stood up and walked to the microphone. A hush fell over the crowd. Eleanor returned to her seat, a smug, confident look in her eyes. She thought I was about to engage in a messy, emotional debate. She was wrong. My name is David Ramsey. I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the speakers so that it filled every corner of the room. And I am not here tonight to talk about my feelings. I am here to talk about facts. I looked directly at Eleanor. Fact 1. On the afternoon of May 15th, dog feces were smeared on my children's property, and a hateful, racist message was written on public pavement. This was not a prank. This was a targeted hate incident designed to intimidate two 8-year-old children. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Fact 2. For the past 3 years, Mrs. Albright has been engaged in a relentless campaign to privatize this community's public park. I have here. I held up a thick file folder, copies of her letters to the city council, filled with racially coded language about outsiders and transients, arguing that our public park should be reserved only for the residents of the HOA. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Many residents who simply enjoyed the park had no idea about her secret political campaign. And fact 3, I said, my voice dropping slightly, is the most important one. Mrs. Albright, in a sworn statement to the police, you claimed you were home all afternoon on the day of the incident. You swore you never visit the Bark Park on Route 17. Is that correct? Her eyes narrowed. That is correct. This is harassment. It's not harassment. It's a question, I said calmly. I signaled to Jen, my colleague from the tech lab, who was standing quietly at the back of the room. She dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen behind the podium. The enhanced security footage filled the screen. The image was clear. It showed Eleanor walking away from the park at the exact time of the incident, and clipped to her dog's leash, glowing like a toxic beacon, was the bright green bag. This footage, I said, as the crowd gasped, was taken on the afternoon of May 15th. And this, Jen clicked to the next slide, a side-by-side comparison of the bag in the video and a photo of the free bags from the Bark Park's website, is the bag. A bag you swore you never use from a place you swore you never go. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a lie being utterly and publicly dismantled. Eleanor's face was a crumbling ruin of disbelief and panic. Her supporters stared at the screen, then at her, their faces slack with shock. You lied, Eleanor. I said, my voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a deep, weary sadness. You lied to the police, you lied to this community, and you have been lying to yourself for years. This was never about cleanliness or standards. This was about prejudice. This was about your desperate attempt to control a world that is changing around you. You targeted my children because they represent that change. You used filth and hate to try and drive them out of a public park and a community where they have every right to be. At that moment, as if on cue, 2 uniformed police officers entered the community center. They walked calmly, deliberately through the stunned crowd and stopped directly in front of Eleanor's chair. Eleanor Albright. The taller officer said, his voice respectful but firm, "You are under arrest for filing a false police report and perjury in addition to the ongoing investigation into the hate incident. Please stand up. You need to come with us." The climax was not a shouting match. It was a quiet, devastating moment of truth, illuminated by the cold, unforgiving light of a projector screen. As they led a pale, trembling Eleanor from the room, the community she had tried to bend to her will sat in stunned silence, forced to confront the ugliness she had hidden in plain sight, and the hard, necessary work of building something better in her wake. The fallout from Eleanor Albright's public unmasking was immediate and absolute. The sight of her being led from the town hall in handcuffs became the defining image of the news cycle, a spectacular fall from grace for the woman who had appointed herself the moral arbiter of Willow Creek. The community, shocked out of its complacency, turned on her completely. Her few remaining allies retreated into silence, unwilling to be associated with her toxic legacy. The legal consequences were severe. Faced with the irrefutable video evidence and the charge of perjury, a felony, her case was indefensible. The district attorney, emboldened by the public outcry and the clear evidence of racial animus, pursued the case with vigor. Eleanor's high-priced lawyer quickly negotiated a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to filing a false police report and to a lesser charge of malicious mischief, with a hate crime enhancement that mandated significant consequences. Her sentence was a carefully constructed instrument of justice. It included a lengthy period of probation, substantial fines, and court-ordered restitution to our family, which we immediately donated to a local youth anti-racism project. Most significantly, she was sentenced to 500 hours of community service to be served not by picking up trash on the highway, but by working with the very community justice programs my office administered. She was also required to participate in a formal face-to-face restorative justice circle with my family and other community members she had harmed. Finally, as a condition of her plea, a permanent restraining order was put in place, and she was forced to sell her house and move out of the Willow Creek estates. Her reign was over. The resolution for our community was a slow and deliberate process of healing and rebuilding. The incident had been a trauma, exposing the fault lines of prejudice that many had preferred to ignore. The HOA, under the new, more progressive leadership of Mr. Henderson, who had been profoundly humbled by the experience, launched a Willow Creek Welcomes All initiative. They worked with my office to host a series of workshops on implicit bias cultural competency and bystander intervention. The conversations were often difficult and uncomfortable, but they were necessary. The park, the epicenter of the conflict, became a symbol of this transformation. The community came together to repaint the benches, plant a new community garden, and install a small, little free library filled with diverse children's books. The Stand for Solidarity event became an annual tradition, a celebration of the neighborhood's commitment to inclusivity. The ugly chalk message had been washed away, replaced by a vibrant, permanent mural of a tree, with multicolored handprints for leaves designed by the children of the neighborhood, including Lena and Mateo. For my family, the healing was personal. The restorative justice circle was the most challenging and ultimately the most profound part of the process. Sitting in a room with a humbled, weeping Eleanor Albright was not about forgiveness, but about accountability. It was about forcing her to confront the human impact of her actions, to hear directly from my 8-year-old daughter how it felt to have her bicycle, a precious gift from her grandmother, defiled. Lena, with a courage that brought tears to my eyes, spoke of her confusion and her sadness. Her simple, honest words were more powerful than any legal argument. It was a painful but necessary step in reclaiming our sense of safety and agency. Months later, on a warm, late summer afternoon, our family was at the annual Willow Creek Block Party, held in the newly revitalized park. The air was filled with the smell of barbecue, the sound of a dozen different languages, and the joyous shrieks of children. I watched Lena and Marcus playing tag with Mateo and a group of new friends, their faces bright with laughter. Sarah stood beside me, her hand in mine. "You know," she said, looking out at the vibrant, chaotic, beautiful scene. In a strange way, she gave us a gift. I knew what she meant. The peace we now felt was not the fragile, passive peace of before, the kind that exists by ignoring ugliness. It was a strong, resilient peace, one that had been tested and earned. We had faced down hatred, not with more hatred, but with truth, with community, and with an unwavering belief in the principles of justice. We had not just won a battle against one person. We had helped our entire community win a war for its own soul. And as I watched my daughter ride her clean, bright yellow bike across the grass, free and unafraid in a park that was truly, finally hers, I knew this was a victory that would last.